substitutes for English. Those of you who are not familiar will quickly become familiar with them. And some people have the idea that phonetics is mainly about phonetic symbols. Well, it isn't. Phonetics is about pronunciation, about sounds, about making noises, about speaking foreign languages, in this case, pronouncing English in a good way. Nevertheless, it's very helpful to make use of phonetic symbols in order to refer to pronunciations unambiguously. English spelling is so confused, so unreliable, that we need another way of indicating unambiguously what the sounds are that we're talking about. Indeed, one of the big difficulties that anybody teaching or learning English faces is the question of how do we pronounce this or that word, a word that we know in writing. You all know this word, spelled F-R-O-N-T. Now the question is, with which of these other words does it rhyme? To rhyme is to have the same vowel sound and the same following consonants. So does this word go with font, with don't, with hunt, with flaunt, with want? Difficult question. And many people whose English is really pretty good reveal themselves as less than perfect by saying at the front. In English we do not say front. It doesn't rhyme with font, even though it's spelt with the same letters. Now by using phonetic transcription, we can look unambiguously at the sounds involved. And there I've highlighted in green the symbol of a vowel. So when we then compare font and don't and hunt and flaunt and want, then at the top front, you can see that front rhymes with hunt. Front, hunt. Something that the spelling conceals from you. It hides it. But it's very important to know this fact. So one big job is to know, even if you can make all the sounds perfectly, and make all the distinctions that you ought to be making, is to know which sounds to use in which words. Now, ideally, if you were starting from the beginning, every time you learnt a new word in English, you would also learn its pronunciation. When we study foreign languages, when we learn French or German or other languages, we have problems with gender. We have to learn with each noun in French, is it masculine or feminine? Same in Italian, same in Spanish. We are always given the advice, learn it when you first learn the word. You learn mano, it's la mano. You have to know that right at the beginning, otherwise you'll be confused. Unfortunately, if you haven't learnt it early, it's quite difficult to learn it later on. That's the position many of you are in, I'm afraid, with pronunciation, because you know the word, but you're not sure how to pronounce it. So consult a dictionary, if in doubt, and drill yourself to look up the pronunciation of words you don't know. One very useful technique in language teaching is known as contrastive analysis. This means we analyze the two languages involved in the learning situation, and we see what the difference between them is. So we compare and contrast. We're talking about pronunciation, so compare and contrast the sounds of the L1, that's the learner's first language, mother tongue, whatever it is, and the sounds of the L2, that's the target language, the language we're learning. In this case, English. Compare the phonemic system, the system of significantly different sounds of the first language and of English. Well, sometimes we'll find that they're the same, essentially the same. Then we predict no problems, we predict positive transfer. The learner can use his existing knowledge of his own language. However, where they're different, where there's a difference between the L1 and the L2, then we predict negative transfer, we predict problems, we predict interference, because the natural tendency is to assume that the language you are learning is the same, works in the same way as your own language. And so you will tend to use the familiar sounds of your own language to speak the foreign language. And that's interference from the L1, that's negative transfer. Here's an example involving English and French. French is the language that most English school children first tackle. And this relates to the English word purr and the French word peur. When an English cat is pleased, it purrs. That's purring. Cats purr. In French, when you are afraid, the French for to be afraid is avoir peur. And to say I'm afraid, you say j'ai peur. To say he's afraid, you say il a peur. Now, in the English classroom, people learning French generally say avoir peur. And to say he's afraid, they say il a peur. That's not quite what French people say. They say il a peur. Now, what's the difference between peur and peur? They're different. If we can analyse the differences, we can see what these interferences are. It works in the other direction as well. French people learning English, they use French sounds, the cat purrs. And that sounds, that's a French accent, of course, in English, and it sounds foreign. Well, I put in red there a narrow phonetic transcription of these two words in the two languages. We needn't worry too much about what those details are, except to say that we can analyse them. The English consonant at the beginning, the English P sound, is followed by aspiration. We'll talk about aspiration later on. Anyhow, it's purr, the cat purrs. French P has no aspiration, j'ai peur, il a peur, 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 peur. So that's one difference. In English, when we purr, when we make the sound we smile, our lips are spread. You can see my teeth. In French, when I say that vowel, my lips are rounded and somewhat protruded. The French word, more or less, as well as that, also ends in a kind of R sound, but an R sound made at the back of the mouth, made with the extreme back of the tongue against the uvula. So we have purr, purr. In my kind of English, we have no R sound in the word purr when it's said on its own. In American English, you have an R sound going right through, purr. American cats purr. British cats purr. But neither of them make the noise of a French purr. Right, so by looking at these details and understanding the phonetic differences, we can help the learner to home in on the problem and tackle the problem, whatever it is, aspiration, lip position, inappropriate R sounds. Let's take another example. Vowel sounds. In English, we have three vowels, e, a, They're all different. They cause the word to have different meanings, as we can see when we compare a bed that you sleep in, bad, not good, and bud on a tree or a flower. Bed, bad, bud. So English, in this particular part of the vowel system, has three vowels. Many languages, though, don't have three vowels like those, and this may give rise to problems. have got only two. And then they're faced with the problem that probably two of the English vowels sound very similar. And they want to map two different English vowels onto one of their own vowels. So, in some languages we have an E and an A, and people whose first language is Spanish or Japanese might be tempted to say bed, bal, bal, both the same. Or if we're being Japanese, bed, ban, both the same. And there they have the problem then of distinguishing, learning to make the difference between bad and bad being different. Is this a summer course or is it a summer course? It's a summer course, and it's an important difference. Others, for example, speakers of German, Polish, and Russian, typically hear the English vowels of bed and bad as the same thing. Bed, 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 I sleep on a bed. It's very bad. I use a very strong German accent. But it's quite different, that's not a problem. So, speakers of these languages have to learn to hear and make the difference between bed and bad. Now, this is a twofold problem. It's a problem, yes, in pronouncing the sounds, but also, very importantly, it's a problem in hearing the sounds. We all hear everything through the filter of our own first language, unless we've learnt not to. That's why we give you ear training, because it's important for you to learn to listen carefully and to hear the differences that exist in English, even though they may not all exist in your own first language. There are various kinds of error that we can recognize. The most important category, known as phonemic errors, involve a failure to distinguish the phonemes of the target language of English in this case. That is, failure to distinguish bed from bad or bad from bad, where it's going to make a difference to the meaning of a word. Because you're failing to signal a particular contrast, this may lead to confusion when you speak. More importantly, if you can't hear a contrast, you may have difficulty understanding the native speaker. So here's another example for Korean. Koreans, like Filipinos, have a problem distinguishing p from f. We have pairs of words in English like pin and fin. They mean different things. In the Korean classroom, the beginners will want to say pin, pin, for both of them. And they have to learn to hear this difficult contrast, and then also to make it. There are other errors, which we can call phonetic errors, which are not so serious. They involve a failure to get the sounds exactly right. Even though you're making the distinctions, you might think, nevertheless you're not doing it in quite the right way. All the things that add up to a foreign accent belong in one of the categories I'm presenting to you here. And like other elements of foreign accent, phonetic errors obviously can be tolerated by other people, by native speakers and by speakers of other languages using English. But if there are too many of them, they cause a problem. Why? Well, they can be irritating because they demand extra effort from the listener to work out what you're saying. They can be distracting. If I have to concentrate to work out what you mean, then that distracts me from concentrating on your message. If you say to me, "Where do you live?" Well, first of all, I hear leave at the end, but that doesn't make sense. Where do you leave? Doesn't make sense. So you must have meant, where do you live? Or did you mean, when did you leave? I have to, so I'll make a decision about that kind of thing, which uses up my mental powers, so I can't concentrate on listening to what you're saying and paying attention to it. That's why this is not a good thing to do. It can also be amusing, which may be fine, or it may mean that you sound ridiculous, which is not what you want. So an example of this, unlike the Japanese, the Koreans don't have a problem pronouncing L sounds, but they don't necessarily make them sound very English. So the word pull, as we say in English, to pull on a rope, typical Korean pronunciation would be pull, pull, and pull on a rope. And that's not quite right, but we understand it. One other example applies to Koreans and also to Chinese. In a word like speed, high speed, even though in those languages there is an appropriate but sound available, Koreans and Chinese tend to say speed, with aspiration. We look at this when we talk about aspiration, but it's inappropriate in this position after S. And the third category we need to worry about are what I call phonotactic errors. These are errors to do with syllable structure, to do with the place where sounds occur. You could make the sound, but you can't make it in the right place or in the right combinations. English has rather complicated syllables. That is to say, many English syllables begin not with one consonant, but with several consonants. Many English syllables end with a consonant, or indeed with several consonants. And depending on your first language, this may be a problem. One of our difficulties running a course like this is that one person's problem is not a problem at all to somebody else. It all depends upon your first language. So, should we say, Germans or Russians don't have problems pronouncing in strong. Well, they might have little problems to begin with, but in general, the idea of having three consonants is not in itself difficult. But speakers of Spanish or Arabic, certainly Japanese, yes, are going to have problems with a word like strong. So, typical Spanish solution might be estrón. 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 He is an estrón man. Instead of, he's a strong man. Because in Spanish, you have the habit of supporting such clusters by putting a vowel in front. I come from España instead of I come from Spain. The Japanese habit, on the other hand, is to separate out the various consonants with an extra vowel. So something along the lines of strong. It might not really be a big vowel, you won't get suturong, but you might have strong, and all that going on there. It's very difficult for Japanese people to think of strong as one syllable. It feels to them like four syllables. So this is partly a mental problem. You have to look at things in a different way and learn to see it from an English point of view as a single syllable, strong. Okay, interference, various kinds of interference. Well, just look at the summary on the handout. Just to run over those points. Section 2 on the handout. We've got listening, recognizing the sounds. That's why we give you ear training. And we've got speaking, that's producing the sounds, production. And so we have drills and so on for that. Contrastive analysis tells us which matters are likely to be most troublesome. And we've looked at some examples of that. The last point in that paragraph is that you may have to unlearn some of the things that you do in your native language, to unlearn them because they're inappropriate in English. It's not just a matter of learning new things, it's also a matter of unlearning old things. In particular, unlearning muscular habits. You have to coordinate muscles and muscular movements in different and new ways. Now, I thought the other thing we could do this morning that would be useful would be, again, to look at some of the things that are very familiar to you, but tend to get overlooked by those who think only of the writing and don't think of the pronunciation. And this concerns, first of all, the English plural ending, the regular plural. There's a cat, there's a dog, there's a horse. And then underneath, you can see some cats, some dogs, and some horses. Well, how do we make the regular plural in English? The rule you learn first probably is about writing, and it tells you to add the letter S, or sometimes, occasionally, ES. But the rule in pronunciation is not quite the same as that, because if we look at it carefully, we can see we add different things for those three words. Cat, two cats. Dog, two dogs. Horse, actually it was three dogs, wasn't it? Horse, four horses. Is. And the choice between these three possibilities has a very simple explanation. What we have to do is to look at the last sound, not the last letter, but the last sound of the stem, of the singular form. If the last sound is voiceless, then we add voiceless s. Cat is voiceless, so we add cats. If the last sound is voiced, dog, voiced, then we add voiced z, giving dogs. The dogs are barking. But there's a special exception. If the last sound is a sibilant, there are the sibilants in green. Those are the sounds s, z, sh, j, ch, j. If the last sound is a sibilant, then we add an extra vowel. Some people add a, some people add a, doesn't matter, giving us horses or horses. And so the word then gets an extra syllable. Sibilants give you syllables. There are more examples on the handout, where you also see that this applies not just to the plural suffix, but also to the possessive, written with apostrophe s, to the plural possessive, written s apostrophe, to the contracted form with is or has, written with apostrophe s, all of them pronounced in the same way: lips, laughs, carrots, cats or voiceless, things, loves, goes, dogs or voiced, horses, wishes, causes or sibilants. And then on the handout we also have the rather similar rule for the past tense and past participle, which again is voiceless after a voiceless sound. Miss gives you missed. Laugh gives you laughed. Finish gives you finished. I heard an international diplomat on the radio a few days ago saying we had finished. Not we had finished. No, we had finished. He didn't know this rule. This is a very basic rule. This is a very elementary rule. What a tragedy that someone whose English was really very, very good in all sorts of other ways didn't know this basic rule of pronunciation. You will all know it. After voice sounds we add d, plan, plan, rub, rubbed, carry, carried. When do we add an extra syllable? Well, for the past participle past tense, it's after T and D. So wait, weighted, grade, graded, paint, painted. Question. You know the verb to breathe. I'm breathing in and out. We're all breathing, I hope. All right. I breathe, you breathe, he or she. Now, do we add an extra syllable or not? Breathe. Is that a sibilant? No. So, no extra vowel. He breathes. All one syllable. He breathes. She breathes. Today, I breathe. Yesterday, I breathed. Again, all one syllable. Breathed. We shall give you lots of practice about difficult things. And we shall ask you not only to pronounce them, but also to listen to them. So, especially for the Japanese, we shall concentrate, amongst other things, on the difference between L and R, and the difference of sound between light and right. This is a light bulb shedding light. This is a sum, and that's the right answer. Light, right. And we shall ask you, for example, to say which is which. Is this one right? No. Is it light? Yes. Is it light? You say? Yes. Is it right? No. Is it right? No. Or we could ask you where it is. We should also, of course, analyse the phonetics involved and point out that R involves median escape of air, that's down the midline, whereas L involves the lateral escape of air at the sides. If you have your tongue in the position for an R sound and then suck in, you should feel cold in the middle. Try it. Think of red, cold in the middle. If you make an L sound, lead, and suck in, you should feel cold at the side, because it's a lateral. We shall get you to hear them not just on their own, but also in combinations, in clusters. To pray, to play. Are they playing? No, they're praying. Are they praying? Yes. Are they praying? Yes. Are they playing? No. Okay. This one is for the Spanish speakers as well. Okay, this is a boat. This is a vote. Is this vote? No. Is it vote? No. Is it boat? Yes. Is it boat? Yes. Is it vote? No. Is it boat? Yes. Is it boat? Yes. Is it vote? No. Good, well done. Now, you can also do this with one another or with native speakers of English. You mustn't let what you learn finish in the classroom. If you have difficulties with R and L, right, light, correct, collect, then you can experiment if you have access to a native speaker of English, like your tutor. You can try it out, and you say, correct. You're not sure that the native speaker will say, yeah, that one was whichever it was. Point to it. And in this way, you can try what works and what doesn't work, and find out where you can safely place your tongue and so on in order to get the result that you wish for. This is an experimental process. It requires your active collaboration. You're not here to sit back in the lecture or to sit back in the class and let it wash over you. You've got to engage actively, listening, learning to improve your powers of auditory discrimination, to hear the difference between one sound and another, learning to hear better, and then also to pronounce better, to perform the vocal gymnastics. Now, we shall use a large number of technical terms of one kind and another. I thought we ought to go through some of the basic terminology which we shall be using. Okay, articulation then is the production of speech sounds using the speech organs to modify the airstream that is set in motion by the lungs. And we classify consonants, well, in three ways, two of which are the place and manner of articulation. Place of articulation concerns the place where we make an obstruction in our mouth when we're producing a sound. So if you take the sounds b, b, m, as you can see by looking, they're made with the two lips, b, b, m, b, b, m, b, b, m. We call them bilabials, lower lip and upper lip. The sounds f and v, on the other hand, are made with the lower lip and the upper teeth. Lower lip, upper teeth. A picture of that somewhere. There we are. So this is a cross-sectional diagram, face diagram as we call it, showing the two lips in contact for p, pen, pan, pig. Compare that with the labiodental, lower lip, upper teeth of fin, fan, fig. Looking at this kind of picture, which you'll find in all the reference textbooks, of course, is useful to make sure you've got your organs of speech in the right positions. The TH sounds are called dentals because for them we place our tongue tip against the teeth. Thing, this. T, d, n, l, s, z. A little bit further back, alveolars. R, tr, dr. Further back still, post-alveolar. Sh, j, ch. Different arrangement. Some people call that post-alveolar. We still call it on the whole palato-alveolar. Yeah. Palatal. K, g, n. Going further back, you can't easily see this. Velar, back of the tongue and the hard and the soft palate. W, double articulation, lips, and back of the tongue, labial-velar. H sound, hand, and glottal stop, made in the glottis, that's in the throat and the larynx. They're called glottals. That's places of articulation. Just to remind those of you who know it already, those of you who are coming upon it for the first time, we'll do it bit by bit. Manners of articulation is the second dimension, where we can either make a complete closure, blocking the flow of air, giving us plosives, we can have a narrowing where the air continues to escape, fricatives. Combination of plosive and fricative gives us affricate. Nasals have the air escaping continuously through the nose. Soft palate down. R and L are liquids. They have a peculiar articulation that's separate from all of the rest. Y and W are semivowels made like vowels. Those are two of the dimensions. I said there are three dimensions. What's the third dimension? Voicing. We looked at that when we were looking at plurals and past tenses. Let's look at it again. If we take the sounds s and they differ in voicing. S, is voiceless. Is voiced. The easiest way to observe this for yourself is to cover your ears with your hands. Now, I'm going to ask you to do this, and you must do it aloud. Don't whisper to yourself, do it aloud. So everybody, make a go on, cover your ears. You can hear that buzz in your ears. For no buzz. Alternate them. You can hear the difference between the two. So that's our third dimension, voiceless or voiced. So now, all of these things we shall come back to. That's just a quick introduction.